A few more people straggle in. Let's see here. All right. I think it's 10:04. That's casually late. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. This is really, really exciting to have all of you coming down to our offices to visit us here on Earth Day. Happy Earth Day, everyone, right? Yeah. A quick little story this morning. So I'm having a cup of coffee, eating some oatmeal with my 5-year-old. She was sharing with me that it's, there's a sound feedback thing. So Rosie, 5-year-old, she's going to turn 6 in 4 days. So she was sharing with me that she's about to turn 6 in 4 days. And she's like, Dad, it's Earth Day. She's like, isn't it interesting that Earth Day is on Compost and Recycle Day? Because it's trash day in our neighborhood. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. And I thought about it. I was like, oh, I still think of it as trash day. And, it's Compost Recycle Day. So if Earth Day if there's any lesson in there that, there's monumental progress that we make with our big campus decarbonization projects that we're all here hoping to work on and working on. But there's also generational little things that something as simple as Compost and Recycle Day that I think are taking root out there. So I told Rosie that I would share that story with everyone. And then I also told her I would take everyone's picture so that she had proof. So if you could hold this for me. All right, everyone, you got to get up again now. Everyone's it's all right. Everyone stand up. Don't worry about personal space. It's kind of get up straight.
Hi.
Beware of pickpockets. So, all right, so I think you got it. Let's do one of these. Come over here. All right, that's awesome. And all right, and how about, and then real quick, on the count of 3, let's get a happy Earth Day from everyone. Count of 3. 3, 2, 1.
Happy Earth Day!
There you go, Rosie. Okay. Yeah. So thank you for humoring me there. So really excited that you're all here. Just a quick, I think we had 150 RSVPs. We cut it at that. We got a little bit of room, traffic happens. Sunny days happen. So, there's folks that flew in all the way from Spokane for this meeting today. So, I don't see him. He's in here somewhere. So anyways, thanks everyone for showing up and coming down here. It's a really exciting conversation and topic. Of the 150 folks at RSVP, I think it's worth noting we had 12 GCs, 30 or so design firms. We have MEP contractors. We have public and private utilities. We have consultants of all shapes and sizes. We have some owners, we have some nonprofits, and we have some students and some student groups. And online, we have the universities that couldn't join us today. We did send them links, and so Washington State, Eastern, and Central, some of them are online, and some of their student groups are online, as well as partners with our universities that are here today. So really excited that you're all here and excited to get to our program. All right, so this is our agenda. We're gonna keep it kind of short and sweet. We'll do a little Earth Day shout out and talk about its roots actually here in Washington that maybe some of you knew, maybe some of you didn't know. We'll do just a little Clean Energy Transformation Act, Clean Buildings Act, Climate Commitment Act overview. We will not dive into great detail there. There was an agenda at the front when you walked in, had a little QR code on it. If you didn't grab one of those, grab it. Amelia and I wrote a white paper back in November. That QR code links to it and a couple of one-pagers that we did. I think it does a pretty good job of doing a high-level, what is the Climate Commitment Act? And this was after the November election, after it was maintained and not repealed. So and how it links to the Clean Buildings Act and House Bill 1257 and House Bill 1390. So those are resources for all of you. We're working on a second white paper on if we don't get all of our CCA funds, how are we going to pay for all this? But we will maybe talk about that later. We'll let the dust settle on the governor's budget, and then we'll go from there. And yeah, we'll have our guest presenters come up and talk about the cool projects that are happening on their campuses. And then when we get done, if you all don't mind, if you have questions, jot them down, stick them in your phone, and then let's save questions for the very end. We'll bring everyone up and we'll do a little panel style Q&A. And then if we have a little time at the end, we can all hang out and have a cup of coffee and chat about all the cool decarbonization stuff we're trying to do. So I think with that, how about some housekeeping? If anyone needs to use the restroom, it's back by the elevator where you came in. It's to the left of the elevators. There is a pass code. It's 1955. It's the year OAC was founded. It is scribbled on the whiteboard up there in case you forget, but 1955 is the bathroom pass code. We have coffee and some refreshments in that little kitchenette on the far side of the building, a few snacks back here. If anyone's got to run and you're pushing it to your next meeting, blood sugar, dive and grab something for the road. I think that's the plan. Any other housekeeping stuff? Did I miss anything? All good? With that, again, welcome, and I'll hand it off to Amelia.
Take that from you. So today is Earth Day. It's actually the 55th Earth Day anniversary. So we thought we'd give a short history lesson on how it all began. So it started with Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson. He is this gentleman in the center. He is credited with founding Earth Day back in the spring of 1970. He didn't do this alone. He recruited the help of Dennis Hayes, who is pictured in the bottom left and bottom right. Dennis Hayes is a product of Camas, Washington, and he attended Clark Community College, which is located down in Vancouver. And he helped to organize the first Earth Day event, which involved 2,000 universities and colleges. So that's about half of the universities and colleges in the United States. It involved about 10,000 K-12 schools and had an estimated 20 million participants on the first Earth Day event, which is pretty darn incredible if you ask me. Dennis Hayes went on to found the Earth Day Network, which expanded to 180 nations. He worked with President Carter's administration heading the Solar Energy Research Institute. And in 1992, he became the president, and he's now the CEO of the Seattle-based Bullitt Foundation, where he oversaw the construction and development of the Bullitt Center, which is located here on Capitol Hill, which actually opened on Earth Day in 2013. And the Bullitt Center is the first building to be fully certified under the Living Building Challenge, which is pretty neat. Fun fact about why the date April 22nd was chosen was because it fell between colleges' exams and spring breaks. So it was really to maximize the student participation, which is pretty fitting today for a conversation today on college campus decarbonization. So with that, 55 years ago, that was our first Earth Day event. Now we're going to fast forward almost 50 years to the year 2019, where Washington passed the Clean Energy Transformation Act, which requires the use of 100% clean energy by the year 2045. This act really sets the stage for additional legislation to be passed specifically targeting the state's high emitting categories. One of those categories being buildings, which account for 27% of the state's emissions. To address this, the Clean Buildings Act was passed, which creates energy performance standards aimed at reducing the energy consumption of buildings and improving their efficiency. And within this act, we see bills like House Bill 1257, House Bill 1390, which is what we're interested in here today, which is looking at the decarbonization of district energy systems. So we have these requirements that are set forth in the Clean Energy Transformation Act and the Clean Buildings Act, which really set these new standards. And with these new standards, we're seeing projects, building improvement projects, campus improvement projects. So the big question is, how are we going to pay for those? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Josh to talk about the Climate Commitment Act.
Thank you so much, Amelia. How about a round of applause for me? Let's keep it lively. Thanks, Amelia. Yeah. Thank you. That's a great overview. So Oh, that's a brighter slide. So yeah, how are we going to pay for all this? Where's the money coming from? If only there was some sort of fund that was able to raise money on a quarterly basis that we could put in an account somewhere that would fund these types of projects. Well, we have the Climate Commitment Act here in Washington. It's the third Cap and Invest program in North America, joining a program in California, joining a program in Ottawa, up in Canada. So it's putting together these funds. The act came out, and let me just make sure I get the stats right. It came out in 2021. It was basically allowing the cap of allowable greenhouse gas emissions from the state's largest emitting polluters. So think of oil refineries, natural gas production facilities, and it's requiring the reduction in total emissions, but really it's the purchase of these allowances for the emissions that are over that required threshold that's funding this account. And these auction proceeds are then reinvested into projects that some of us are working on and some of us are hoping to work on. So that's kind of the high level of the CCA. Again, we have the white paper that dives into it a little bit more. I think, for the purpose of today, half of that fund is going towards clean transportation projects, as the pie chart shows up here. And this is the funds that were $3.2 billion was appropriated by the legislature for the 23-25 biennium. So right now in Olympia, they're figuring out what this is going to look like for the next biennium. There's some ideas on what that's going to look like. We're not going to dive into that today. We're looking at doing another event later in the year. We'll let the dust settle on the governor's budget, and we'll figure out, this money is here and what the next round is going to look like. The good news is, when you look at the slice of pie up there that is building decarbonization, that's about 16%. And then there's a slice of that's higher ed. That higher ed piece is the 136 million that you see in orange there. And that's about 4% of the whole pie. So my back of the napkin math, and I'd say don't quote me on this, but it's about $5 billion, give or take, to decarbonize all of our universities and colleges in Washington State. And if we're looking at a 20-year program, that's about $250 million a year. So this has got 136 million, that's 4%, 250 million. All right, the climate commitment auctions are raising about $1 billion a year. So that's real money. So by my math, we need about 25% of those funds to fully decarbonize our college and university stock. So 4% to 25%, we have to bridge that gap. That's what we're all here to help figure out. I think we can get there. Not all these projects are going to be built at the same time. I was just in Ellensburg last week with good folks at Central Washington University. They had a little geothermal symposium out there, and they've broken ground. They've got an open loop system. They've got extraction wells in place. They've got buildings going up, and this is with CCA funds that have been distributed. The CCA funds have helped to pay for feasibility studies. They've helped to pay for some design projects. And I think with that, I'll just stop talking about the CCA and let the guys that actually know what they're doing talk. So I think with that, we'll turn it over to Scott. But maybe real quickly, trivia question. How many colleges and universities are there in Washington State? Public. Scott, you don't get to answer. Anyone? Quick, throw it out. Throw it out. Just any old number. Don't be scared. 30, 80, 20, 100, a million. All right, so it's a trick question. There's 40, and that's not including all the satellite campuses. That's not including UW Tacoma. That's not including UW Bothell. That's University of Washington being counted once. Each community college and technical college are being counted once. And as Scott will say, there's actually, I think he's got 1,000 buildings, and there's campuses all over the state. So when we're looking at House Bill 1257, House Bill 1390, and decarbonizing all of the public universities and colleges, this is what we're looking at. So with that, I would like to introduce Scott Morgan, the Sustainability and Energy Conservation Manager with the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges, to chat a little bit about the Community and Technical College program here in the state. Scott, yeah.
All right, let's see if I can figure it out. Well, he already introduced me, so there's that. My position is new as of last May. I'm on the capital budget team. Thanks to Daryl's vision, we now have a sustainability and energy conservation position at the state board level. And now I'm confused. All right, that's it. Yes, that's us. So back to how many colleges are there? There are a lot of colleges, and just about every college has satellite campuses. Within the CTC system, 34 colleges, main campuses, 48 satellite locations. Now you have to understand we're community and technical colleges. Some of those satellite locations are 3,000 to 4,000 square foot building in a rural location. We have a building in Ilwaco. We have one in Forks, in Coville. Coville might have 2 buildings. Clarkston. So they were spread around the state quite a bit. Whidbey Island. Concrete. That's a Head Start Center. But we do have a fairly extensive presence around the state. And for those of you who are not familiar with OFM's legendary, is there anyone here from OFM? Good. Facilities portfolio management tool. That's what I pulled this from. So the F is one building, the green F. The gray is just a count of the buildings in that general location. We're mostly centered around the population centers, but we are distributed around the state. So that's the community and college, community technical college system. As you can see here, a lot of buildings. Now they are not all at the level of which, you know, they would need to comply with the Clean Buildings Performance Standard. But generally speaking, we're finding that, first of all, campus level compliance is allowable for us, and it is a better option because everyone has one science building or one health sciences building or something that's running above the EUIT, and everything else is way below it. And we're still working on getting building energy submeters put in. A lot of the campuses were built with main utility meters feeding the campus. Why would we put an energy meter on the individual buildings? That's extra cost, right? It didn't make sense at the time. So we don't necessarily have granular building energy data on every campus yet. Working on that. Oh, also trivia point. OFM defines a facility as a structure with at least one wall, a roof, and a permanent foundation. So some of these are baseball dugouts and bus shelters. Not a lot, but a few of them, you know. Now those buildings, fortunately, are naturally decarbonized. They don't get used as much in the winter, but you know, they already work for us. We do have 8 qualifying district energy systems. There are a couple others that are very small, 2 or 3 buildings, but we do have 8 that met the qualifying criteria and a total of 93 buildings attached to those 8 systems. And most of this is pretty straightforward. We've got heating, hot water. We've got multiple cooling loops. Only a couple are steam, and you can see the size. There are a couple special cases. Cascadia College shares a campus with our evil twin, UW. I was going to try and make the point that the community college system is bigger than UW because I like picking on David. But then I opened up FPMT for UW's buildings, and they're all over the world. I don't know how you do that. Anyway. But this is a shared campus. I don't know exactly what the square footage is for UW's buildings on the cooling loop, but we've got 173,000 gross square foot in Cascadia's buildings. Seattle Central is on the Centrio steam. Is Link here? I haven't seen Link. Okay. There may be someone in the audience who can correct me when I get this because I'm still figuring out details for Seattle's. but they're on a private district energy system attached to that. And they are seriously looking at adding more of their campus buildings to that system. So those are the nuances. Everybody else has got something built in place. And generally speaking, there's a little bit of fatigue, I got to say, with our current facilities and operations staff working with 40, 50, 60-year-old steam and heating hot water systems. There's also been a lot of other factors that are changing the way that we need to think about operations on college campuses. And so generally, the facilities teams are saying we want more control at the building level. The district energy system is not going to serve what we think we are going to need. So that's most of the campuses, not everyone is looking at that. I'll say the steam systems are old, right? And, you know, we've had in higher ed, there's just been this paradigm that the buildings are open all the time. Long hours, 6 or 7 days a week, because they are just, that's our environment within which all the real work happens. And that environment needs to be accessible. It needs to be there. If a student group wants to meet, they can walk in and find a space to meet. And every quarter, of course, class schedules change a little bit, and there should be a space available for those classes. And then faculty get to the point where they've got a favorite classroom, and they will only teach in that space. And of course, some of those classrooms are very special. There's one at Pierce Fort Stilcombe has got 3 dummy ambulance bodies built inside the classroom for their EMT training, so they can work inside an ambulance, right? So some of them are very special purpose, others are general classrooms. But the conditions are changing. So our balance between remote and in-person instruction is starting to shift from quarter to quarter. There are a lot of uncertainties around enrollment. Utility costs are climbing. Capital reinvestment budgets tend to be tight, and I like this term. Gordian was pitching that this year, right? It's not deferred maintenance. It's not that the maintenance crew wouldn't do their work. It's that there was no investment in getting that work done, right? So those are a little bit tight. And all of those factors are also playing into this preference for more granular control inside the building and across the campus. We've also got several of these campuses already have master plans that are moving in that direction anyway. The new building will not be tied to the old steam system. And so we are, for the most part, one campus is planning to keep their existing hot water system. Highline's thinking about just downsizing to a smaller system, and then Seattle Central might add to that larger neighborhood district system. And no big surprise, air source heat pumps are the dominant. Now, I would say that I was working at a 4-year, I was working at the Evergreen State College for 15 years. And in the 4-year system, we all have these big district systems. And most of us had started planning years ago about how are we going to decarbonize, and have been looking at it and doing a lot of research. The community colleges were not in that space until 1390 came around, and all of a sudden, what are we doing and how do we do it? And so we don't have a history of Seattle Central is the outlier. They have been working hard for 3 or 4 years, doing a lot of feasibility assessments. But generally speaking, across the system, we don't have a history of feasibility assessments. We have not been able to assess groundwater, ground source heat pumps. We have not been able to do that kind of advanced work. So for the most part, we are looking in these plans right now at what is available, what will fit what we have. There is a little bit of a mix. Couple campuses are looking at single pass CO2 heat pumps. Other campuses are looking at multiple pass heat pumps. One campus, yeah, I think some of the members of that team are here, are thinking about centralized heat pumps for steam. The facilities team is not real excited about that, but it is a topic of consideration right now. And I think this is the most important part on my side and for our facilities teams. You know, the buildings are a service. They are a utility in and of themselves. Education cannot happen if there's a problem with the building systems. And education is our primary mission. So it needs to be reliable, it needs to be durable, and none of the teams like getting a call at 10 o'clock and, you know, on a Friday night saying, hey, it ain't working, right? And so I've already heard some really cogent comments about why are we changing from natural gas? Because it's a very mature technology. It's very reliable. It's very well known. So we are really moving into some uncertain and unknown territory for our teams. Josh asked the question at the beginning, funding plans. He also mentioned with CCA, that's pretty much what we're thinking we're going to tap into. And if not, does anybody remember S&H green stamps? I'm sure that there's an option out there yet. We are going to start a budget planning process in June for the system. So the colleges are mostly independent entities. The state board coordinates and supports their work. We do prepare and present a single capital budget request, and I think the operating budget as well, for the whole system. But we will start this planning summit in June. We already have a long list of capital projects. We already have a long list of minor works projects. One of our team is just started this year on the biannual facilities condition survey, and he's going campus to campus to look at the buildings and equipment and update the conditional assessments for those buildings. And that will does feed in and support a lot of the capital planning. So trying to squeeze in 8 15-year decarbonization plans to that process is kind of like trying to get through I-405 in the middle of the day. So we've got some strategic planning to do, and we will be starting that in June. I will say we're probably fortunate that most of these projects are going to be small. It's going to be building scale heating. Many of them, I think, we will be able to go through building by building. We can spread that. Well, Clark has a lot of buildings, a lot of floor space on their system, but some of the smaller campuses, we can easily spread those out over 15 years. Others, we will not be able to. The central plants, however, as you know, much bigger jump. We really don't want to do part of that transition in one biennium and have to wait 2 to finish it. And so we've got a few things we've got to put into place. But I think, unlike what a lot of the 4 years are facing, we should be able to break this up into a lot of smaller projects over the 15 years, and that'll make it a little bit easier for us. Make sure I didn't skip anything important, because I'm expecting it to be very, very smooth. Or I'll retire, one or the other. I did realize a few weeks ago, we've got these 5-year progress updates due to Commerce, and it would be really valuable with all the uncertainties in the market and the technologies and energy costs, everything else that's going on right now, that it will be really valuable for us to take a moment during that 5-year cycle to reassess our plans. And so I'm expecting that we will need to do that in a greater or lesser extent for the 8 plans as we're working through them. And then we have 26 other colleges, some of which are actively interested in decarbonization. 2 districts, Seattle, which is 3 colleges, and Spokane, which is 2 colleges, are required greenhouse gas reporters at the state agency level. And they're visible. They're very interested in hitting those decarbonization goals for all their campuses, not just the district. And Spokane doesn't have a district energy. It's a shame because if we had district energy on the east side, I've got this great idea with giant magnifying glasses and we'd be great. But no, everything's over here under the clouds. And of course, Seattle's got additional policies that they need to follow here in the city of Seattle. So we are hoping that we can take some of the lessons learned from these plans and we can build out a process to help the other colleges start working their direction towards decarbonization. I don't expect it to be fast, and that's why I'm saying process. If we can build a good process, then the next sustainability and energy conservation manager can keep it moving forward because it does take a while sometimes. But overall, we're up and running. Everybody is still working on their plans. The planning really just started in earnest around December or January. There was, again, something about state process. It took a long time to actually finalize those contracts and get everything clearly set up. And we are hoping that we'll have enough information at the beginning of June to dig into the plans for our planning summit, but they will be turned into commerce by the end of the month. So, and we'll move from there. And then I believe, who's next? Oh, Josh is next.
All right, well, a warm round of applause. Thank you, Scott. Excellent. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, progress, incremental. There's big picture stuff that it feels like it's taking forever sometimes, but in the weeds, there's a lot of activity that's often going on these projects. So I think that's a little takeaway there. Well, with our next presenter, David Woodson is the Executive Director, Campus Energy, Utilities and Operations from the University of Washington. And a warm round of applause for David Woodson. Thank you, David. Us. The big one is next.
Okay, that's easy. All right, how's everybody doing this morning? Awesome, good, okay. All the UW grads stand up, please. Come on, come on. All right, very good. I'm not gonna make you sing the fight song or anything, but exactly. I see some W's out there. Okay, I'm not sure why Scott wants to pick on me all the time. Because, we really are a fun group. I don't know, I went to one meeting, they were talking about funding, and as soon as I popped onto the Zoom screen, he's like, oh, here comes UW with the vacuum truck to take all the money away. Yeah, look, we're all in this together, Scott. He's laughing because he remembers the meeting when he said that. Okay, all right, a couple little connections of different things. Josh, thanks for arranging all of this. This is awesome. It's great to see such a section of all the folks in Washington that are engaged in this. I feel like I've seen this movie before. I worked up at the University of British Columbia, and there was a whole bunch of carbon legislation different than what's been done in the state of Washington, but it all popped up around 2008, 2009. And what you saw take place across the province, and especially in the lower mainland of Vancouver, where all these municipalities, all these agencies, schools, hospitals, universities, developing their implementation plans. How are they going to do it? And they all had the same problems of aging infrastructure. I hate the word deferred maintenance. I'm glad Scott attacked that and got that out of the way. Don't call it deferred maintenance anymore, because that's not what it is. It's the fact that UW has a 1948 boiler that we still run. That's right beside the 1958 boiler that we still run. That's right beside the 1968 boiler that we still run. That's the problem, folks, is that we actually have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars anyway. And so why not find a way that not only addresses decarbonization, but like everybody in this room wants cheap energy costs. Everybody in this room wants, or UW wants, energy reliability, no matter where it comes from. Yeah, we have a lot of challenges that are in front of us, and we'll get into it. One last connection back to Josh. Earth Day. My oldest daughter, who's now 28, was born on Earth Day. So this is her birthday. And I still have to call her. I sent her a text this morning, but I got to call her today. But yeah, so lots of personal connections to all this. And I think, part of what we do, part of what drives us is our kids and what we're trying to leave behind. So I'm jumping all over the place here for the moment. I haven't even changed the slides yet. Just the context of, I feel like what happened in the Lower Mainland is what is happening here in the state of Washington in this time period now. And so I think it's awesome that the community colleges are developing their plans. And at UW, we have our plan. AEI, I thought they're off in the corner there. Good to see you guys. Helped us. So we started with a strategy, right? Just an overall theme of strategy of what we were trying to achieve at the campus to make it really easy for everybody to make everyday decisions that are consistent with that strategy. And now we've taken that strategy and developed it into our implementation plan. You want to call that a master plan? Go ahead, call it a master plan, because it's the same thing, but an implementation plan just sounds a little more active that that's what we're going to do. And it is what we're going to do. We just need a lot of money that Josh is talking about, and probably all of what he had listed on the slide, plus maybe double that. And so that's a problem. That's a barrier, right? That the capital cost of actually doing anything in this state of significance is and the availability of capital is not what it was perhaps even 5 years ago. So these are our realities, and we'll get into that. Okay, carry on, slide deck. So, for us, back to that CCA and paying into it, we're the second largest public emitter, yes. I'm Dave Litson, I'll pass that. Our power plants, right, the natural gas that we burn in our power plant to produce that steam, that's 93% of our carbon emissions. Sorry, PSE. We love the natural gas you send to us, we really do. But yeah, that's the big heart of it. If we're really going to do something about our Scope 1 carbon emissions, we have to change the way in which we heat buildings. And oh, by the way, that's really the big picture thing here, right? Like all over, like every city, every campus, like whether you're a private campus like Google or Microsoft, or you're a university, or you're a hospital, or you're an airport, this is the fundamental thing of how are we actually going to decarbonize heating for buildings? And in the case of, my other title that I have, I'm part of our industry association with the International District Energy Association. I'm presently the co-chair, and so you might go, oh, geez, he's biased. He's all into district energy. Look, I got involved in it like years ago, and what I feel like is there's like this big secret that like nobody knows about in terms of what's the best way to actually get energy out into buildings. And I actually think the fastest way in which you decarbonize buildings at an urban scale is through decarbonizing the district energy system. It doesn't mean that you don't make the buildings more efficient. You do. That should be like an ongoing thing that you do forever. But about every 40, 50 years, you should be doing a major overhaul of your district energy system. We used to burn coal. Now we burn natural gas. We're going from combusting natural gas and boilers to using heat pumps that run electricity. That's kind of like a fundamental theme, and I'll get into it, what it looks like for UW. But almost any campus, that pivot in technology is what's happening. And who knows what the technology pivot will be 40 or 50 years from now. So anyway, I went from UW to everything, and now back to UW again. That's me, by the way. Look, I think there's an element of we need to be excited about what we're doing, right? This is not going to be easy, right? Forget getting the billions of dollars of money that we actually need. I know that's a challenge, but actually doing this work is going to be a challenge, right? And so, which is super exciting to see everybody in this room here, because we need all of you, by the way, to actually make this happen. And one of the fun things for me, from my previous employer up at University of British Columbia, where we did some really exciting projects like convert the whole campus from steam to hot water and put in a bioenergy plant and upgrade the electrical transmission infrastructure to the campus and do a whole bunch of energy efficiency plays within the building. I got to work with people that came to me afterwards and said that was one of the most exciting projects they ever worked on in their career. Right? It's game changers, and that's what this can be. And anyways, back to the slide deck, right? But like, this is what we want to do. Besides the fact that it's Earth Day, and there's a lot of other good things that come out of this. All right, right. The big switch is boilers to heat pumps. And oh yeah, right? So the heat that we presently, through our cooling system, throw away through our cooling towers, which I'll call heat throwaway machines, is like, right? We spend electricity to get rid of the heat into the atmosphere. 40% of our natural gas can get displaced if we could reclaim that heat, right? Another almost 30% is in the sewer, right? So if you're in an urban setting where we are, with King County regional sewers that literally go right around our campus, almost another 25% of our heat can be reclaimed out of the sewer. Okay. Just to clarify, right, this is when you take a shower in the morning and the warm water that's going down the drain, that is what we're after. That's it, right? Let's clarify. All right. Right, here's the big pivot. Combusting on boilers versus heat pumps and heat exchange. And the nice little, okay, this is like really? So I got a bunch of engineers and architects are going like, really got this chart in front of us? Like, I know I could have done something way more complex, but just go with me here. I think one of the things that happens when we tell this story is everyone's eyes start to glaze over because it's all this engineering talk, and I probably will say something about COP, but I'm going to say that anyway. And but this is just trying to like graphically highlight what happens today versus the future. And so today, right, 100% of that natural gas that's going in, we got a very efficient steam plant at the UW that we've done very well to maintain over the years, but the effect of which is, in the end, off the distribution losses and the losses in the plant, only 60% of that heat actually makes it to the buildings. That would be a COP of 0.6. I think the other problem that Scott kind of alluded to is when you have a steam system, generally we just produce the steam, we put it out at pressure, and that's it. And we, wait for the buildings to take whatever they're going to take. And we don't really know what's going on in the building. That's somebody else. That's another department that's focused on the controls and environment of what's happening inside the buildings. One of the big pivots at UBC when we did this project, converting from steam to hot water, was all of a sudden, in the control room in the hot water plant was large screens where the operators saw the valve positions of every single building on campus and which buildings were calling for heat. And they learned which buildings effectively became the canary in the coal mine. So the disconnect that exists today between a central steam plant and the future of a hot water system, I think are transformational and completely different in terms of that connection. So I feel like I've lived that, Scott. All right, so there's today. Here's the future. So heat pump with 3 different water-based sources. So we're not doing the air source piece, we're doing the water-based source. Now we can, because we're lucky, because we're UW, and we happen to have some awesome resources by us. One, we have a central cooling system that serves half our campus. Key operative word is half the campus. We have the King County sewer lines because we're in an urban location. Any university that's in an urban location that's near regional sewer lines absolutely has to be looking at this opportunity. And I can guarantee you, if any one of you gone to a district energy conference and seen someone giving a presentation on sewer heat recovery, the room is packed and they're standing room. And the only room that's busier is the small nuclear room. The third one is lake heat. Okay, right. One line, it looks beautiful when it's up there. But there's obviously a lot of complexity behind actually taking water from the lake, whether it's to heat or cool. And I don't mean to minimize that whatsoever. But there's a huge opportunity, and there's actually a potential for something of a broader benefit beyond just the needs of the campus. And this is showing it from a heating perspective. And then there's electricity input. So see the energy input compared to the output at the buildings and the losses on the system on the switch to hard. This is an efficiency play, folks. decarbonization is a massive efficiency play. And you go, yeah. Like, wait a second. Electricity is way more expensive than natural gas. Okay, but 14% is a lot less than 100% going in to get 98% out versus 60% out, right? You can do the math on the COP comparison on the ratio and stuff. And we're doing way better on the spark price. This is an energy savings opportunity. And yeah, we can't lose sight of that. All right, okay. Lots of capital to actually get here, right? If I actually want to have this heat pump produce hot water, I actually have to have a hot water network, which means I need to spend about 500 million or so, according to the AEI folks, to actually convert my campus from steam to hot water. They're probably accurate, actually, right? But so that's the big play. And Scott made reference to earlier that there's this push for, or the sort of new technology out there of heat pumps that produce steam. So why are we not, and there's large agencies like Con Edison in New York and Vicinity in Boston and Centrio in Seattle, where their capital costs to convert the steam pipes to hot water pipes involve digging up streets and make that way north and mess up the calculus of actually doing that. So instead, they want to produce steam and use a steam heat pump. The penalty they pay is on the COP. They think they can get a COP of 1.9. My math is looking more like 1.5 on the charts that I look at. And if you've got a spark price difference of somewhere between 3 and 9, depending on where in the country you are, a 1.5 COP means you're going to pay the penalty of extra electrical charges, and you're going to need that extra electricity for the next 40 years that you're going to run that piece of equipment. But you dramatically reduce your upfront capital. That may not just be such a crazy idea, right? If our capital costs are crazy in our state and the access to capital is not the same as it was before, then maybe we have to look at paying that electrical penalty. Okay, how can we get away from the electrical penalty? Well, Seattle City Light provides electrical price at almost half if you buy it between 11 o'clock at night and 7 o'clock in the morning. That's one way. The second way is storage. So if you can store that energy, use it for a steam system, then that would add to that piece. Anyway, was that in our plan? No. So I'll get back to what our plan is, but I just want to highlight, like, it is important to keep paying attention to what is going on around us, not just in our city, but in our country, and then apply it to our application. And maybe there's bits and pieces of ideas that fit. All right, jumping back to this. So efficiency play. Right, here's our 3 sources. To get to the lake, for those of you familiar with the University of Washington, which is half the room, Union Bay here is very shallow. And matter of fact, little peat islands that pop up from time to time, right? So to actually get to the deep part of the lake, where in essence you have the consistent temperature year round, we need to get out past Webster Point. And that pipeline would be proposed to be sort of a cut and cover through the peat in Union Bay. So yeah, exactly. I just added to a whole bunch of environmental permit requirements to be able to do that. So it is a bit of a reach, but the play there is the fact that the ship canal is temperature impaired. And so what we want to be able to do, and I think actually I'm jumping ahead, what we want to be able to do is actually in the summertime, in the spring and the fall, take cold water from the lake and actually use it not just on the campus, but also use it to cool down the ship canal. And we believe it's a betterment. We don't think we can get the temperature so low that it solves the challenge that the salmon presently have. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. The ship canal itself is shallow, so it overheats in the summertime. And as a result, it reaches temperatures already where it's a barrier for salmon to go through. There are agencies today that take about 900 sockeye that they scoop up at the Ballard Locks, and they drive them 34 miles to their destination. Right, that's how they finish their trip. And that's obviously a very important sort of intervention and effort to help the sockeye. We're not saying that we can actually reduce the temperature, that somehow this problem goes away, but we think we can contribute to at least creating some type of a pocket for the salmon that might contribute to that positive improvement. Sewer, the way the sewer flows on campus, it all ends up on the west. And then of course the central heating system also is where our central cooling heat throwaway machines are located. All right, so here's your 11-step to decarbonization plan. I used to have 5 steps, and then AEI helped me with the report, and now there's 11. But no, like this is literally, these are everything that we're taking into account in our present plan today that results in 47 projects that we intend to do over the next 14 years. And right off the top, I've already talked about switching to heat pumps, maximizing the efficiency of the heat pumps, which is why we're going to hot water. Third, when you use electricity, when you never used electricity for, it doesn't matter how efficient that heat pump for, it's still new incremental electricity. And the fact that Seattle City Light already has a peak electrical demand on the coldest days of the year means that we are just adding to that, right? So, so what are we doing to actually manage that electrical load to our campus? And I think there needs to be thought process around in the same way that, like today, Puget Sound Energy mitigates the risk of losing gas to the whole. We talk about reliability, right? There's built-in smart things that have been in place for decades, such as large customers like UW have a 1 million gallon diesel backup tank so that if the temperature gets really cold and PSE sees the drop in pressure on the system, they call us and they say, turn off your gas, use the diesel so that they don't lose gas to millions of customers in Seattle, because that would be a nightmare scenario, right? So really smart things put in place, they're embedded in the tariff. We need to do smart things like that electrically for what happens in January, right? And it might be that, of the 5 boilers that I have in my plant, I keep the 3 newest ones, which also is the 1968 boiler, and use those in the same way that we use the diesel tank today, right? So anyway, sorry, 11 steps, I should just carry on. But there's principles like this, when you look at a load duration curve, which I don't have on here, but I probably should have for this audience, holy smokes, we go a long way with heat recovery from 93% of our natural gas gets displaced from the 3 sources that have been identified here, right? That's huge, right? And so, but did we get to 100%? No. Could we get to 100%? We have in the plan, we've incorporated putting electric boiler, but maybe that's the pivot that we shouldn't be doing. Maybe 93% actually is the right answer. And when you look at what's in 1390, it talks about 90%, right? And it also gives emergency provisions for if there was an electrical power outage that you could rely on a fossil fuel-based system to back you up. All right, so time, how am I doing time? So I carried through. Right, so, well, you can see all the lines on here. Everything I think we've talked about. Did I miss anything? I'll just highlight the cooling system. So this is another sort of electrical pressure that everybody is having in this state, right? Anyone here from Texas or Florida or anywhere? Okay, all right. It's hands, I don't want to raise it. You would never build a building in the South without air conditioning, right? Right? There's 1 person who knows. Okay, all right, but no, you guys have been to Florida and stuff. It's only hot there. Every time you go in a room, you have to bring a jacket because it's freezing cold because everything's air conditioned in there. I'm from Florida. I'll have to admit to that. But in Seattle, our design temperature used to be what, 70 something? Then they went to 82. Now we're at 86, right? And where are they going? They're only going up from there. And so what it means at UW, it means half our buildings are connected to our central cooling system plant. The other half either don't have any air conditioning whatsoever, or they have their own chillers. And so we have a whole bunch of distributed standalone chillers that have their own cooling towers in the buildings, their own heat throwaway machines. And when you do the math, and I'm gonna, be a little sneaky here, but roughly, we're using twice the amount of electricity on those chillers in the buildings to produce the same amount of cooling on the chillers in the central plant. And that's because of diversified load. We're running those chillers, some of the buildings at like 30% or 40%, and they're not in an optimized state. So if electrical load is a problem, and where the electricity is coming from and how green it is a problem, then add more chillers to the central plant and get rid of those distributed chillers and bring back all of that waste heat from all of those buildings to the central plant and use that waste heat to displace cooling. Okay, someone's gonna say, but Dave, summertime, you don't need the heating. You're right, I only need it for domestic load in the summertime. But oh man, from a fall, spring period in Seattle and the state of Washington, this is a fantastic solution for displacing natural gas. All right, and those buildings that don't have cooling at all, that's a bigger and bigger problem with every year that goes by. If we actually intend to use those buildings in the summertime or in the spring or the fall, we actually need to add cooling to them, which means we're going to consume more electricity to get there. All right, or tapping the lake. And just clear, when we're tapping the lake for cooling, we're not talking about displacing all of the cooling systems on the campus. It basically contributes to about another 14,000 tons of load to, I think what total tonnage load was like 35,000 or 34,000. Lyle's giving me a stink eye going, I don't think that's what it was, Dave, but it was something like, it's on the report, you'll see it. Oh, by the way, just as an aside, for Earth Week, we are posting on our sustainability website where we have all of our information about our project, the report that AEI has completed for us. So nice 3,000 page reading for you. I'm sure you'll be right on that, downloading it while this presentation is going on. All right, and that's me. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks, David.
Beautiful.
All right, everyone, let's give it up for David Woodson. Thank you again for joining us today. There's so much information there. That's a lot of fun stuff. So again, Q&A questions. Anyone that is, you're scribbling them down for both Scott and David. We'll do Q&A after Julian presents. But first we have Julian Rogers, Senior Mechanical Engineer with Western Washington University, and he's going to provide us with a little progress update up at Western. And I've been fortunate enough to be working with Julian for the last 12, 13 months, more or less. So everyone, a warm round of applause for Julian. Thank you. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Josh. You said I'm Julian Rogers with Western Washington University. I've been there for about 8 years. Quick overview, do a little intro, go over our existing system, kind of talk about the project, challenges, opportunities, and where we stand now. I think we'll find a lot of similarities. It's fun being the last, just we're all really kind of in the same boat here. Quick intro to Western for those not familiar. We're located in Bellingham, Washington, about 90 miles north here. It's about a 200-acre main campus with 16,000 full and part-time students. That puts us about, I think, half the size of WSU and a little bit bigger than the other regional schools. I think Central and Eastern are kind of 10, 11, 12,000. A little factoid about us, we're the northernmost university in the country. So here, moving on to our existing steam system, this is kind of the 10,000 foot level. We have an 80-year-old central plant that was last expanded in 1970. It's about the age of the boilers in there as well. There's 5 boilers from 15,000 to 100,000 pounds an hour. Steam goes out at 100 PSI. We have about 3 miles of piping on campus. Most of it's in walkable tunnel. There's a few sections that are utility or direct buried, but you can pretty much walk from the south end to north end of campus in the tunnels. And I think one thing that sets us a little bit apart, especially from the other schools that have presented, is we're really it's really one loop at Western. We have one central plant that is sending steam out to, 54 buildings, and it's, it's the only source of heating and domestic hot water for campus. There's no secondary loops aside from Fairhaven, which is kind of towards the south of campus. There's no intermediate water loops, medium pressure stuff. It's kind of all or nothing the way we're set up. So to get into some motivations behind the project, we have our own sustainability action plan that calls for carbon neutrality by 2035. In addition, I think at this point, we're pretty familiar with Washington state initiatives and the Climate Commitment Act. Beyond those, and again, this has been touched on, it's the same for everyone, just the increasing costs and risk associated with the boilers. The plan accounts for 86% of our 1 and 2, or scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions, and 30% of the heat that's generated is lost in distribution, which I think was similar to you guys. Old boilers, 4 of the boilers are over 50 years old. They're getting expensive to maintain. Replacement parts are hard to find. Skilled operators, as buildings move away from steam in general, it's hard to find people that are even qualified to man the plants. And lastly, David did a good job of talking about this, but there's a lack of central cooling on campus. We have summer enrollments up, temperatures are up. Air quality is becoming a bigger issue in the summers, where historically we're doing economizer and night purging as much as we can. That is becoming less realistic, and hoping this project can help solve that. So far, back in 2022, we worked with Cezanne Group in Introba. I think I might have seen Cezanne around here. On a feasibility study, we identified a preferred alternative that involves dividing the campus to 4 sections, each served by an individual plant. The combination of air and water source heat pumps, geo-exchange, and again, a low temperature water distribution throughout each node. I'll back up a second. I guess it's not on here, but the next step after that was that allowed us to get an initial round of CCA funding. And using that funding, we set back and realized this is kind of a project we as a institution don't have any expertise in, and we decided get an owner's advisor would be appropriate. And as Josh mentioned, we hired OAC. They had Cezanne and Introba with them again. And we got together, looked at our feasibility study, refined it a little bit, updated some cost numbers, added some costs to provide an interconnect between the 4 nodal plants to allow some load sharing. And that information was used to support our capital budget request for this next biennium that everyone is anxiously waiting to see how that turned out. And in the meantime, we did receive approval from the state to pursue a progressive design build delivery for the project. A few challenges that we faced. Some are purely technical, and this is just the nature of the beast. Doing this on a working campus. The image here is from Mount Holyoke in Massachusetts, and it looks pretty similar to our campus, and it just gives you an idea of the extent of interruption we might be looking at. And the show must go on. School's not going to stop for this. Students are going to be walking through campus, heads down in their phones, and it's just going to be a real effort to do that on campus without interrupting things more than you have to. Then the technical challenges of the existing buildings. Where do we go? Just like everyone with an old campus is going to be facing. Buildings generally designed for 180-degree water. Most of them don't have cooling. We do have some scattered standalone chillers, but getting that integrated into a central distribution system will be a challenge. And process loads, just who knows what we're now not thinking about in the buildings themselves. That's the more external challenges. It's been touched on, reliance on the electrical utility to have their infrastructure in place. I know PSE is here, and we've been in conversations with them, but there's a lot that has to happen on their side as well. Another challenge is, I think Scott was talking about this, that, we want the desire to be, get as efficient as we can, use the cutting edge equipment, but there's also a real need to be reliable and, not sacrifice reliability for efficiency. We don't want to be the guinea pigs for new technology, but we'll see what's available when we get ready to select it. And I don't know if this is really a challenge, but it's Josh and I think Dave hit this is pretty good. We're all going after the same money for these projects, and we've all got the same mandates, and navigating that is a big part of why we're all here. But not just challenges, we have some opportunities as well. And I'm putting technology here. It was on the challenges slide, but we also do have some great technology on the horizon, and we're pretty excited to see what is available when we really start getting ready to select equipment. Another big opportunity is an integration with the nearby community thermal energy network. The images on the slide are the former Georgia Pacific paper mill site on the Bellingham waterfront. Corix, Canadian-based utility company, has a hot water district that started there. They're serving a few buildings right now. You can see them in that lower picture, but do have plans to expand that network into town, and the potential to connect there is big, and it can't happen until we do the hot water conversion. So we've been communicating with them and are hoping there's potentially an opportunity down the line there. And another opportunity, it's shown here as an opportunity, it's threatening to go to the risk slide, is the IRA elective direct pay investment tax credit. It's something we previously had been kind of counting on. Whether or not it's part of the plan going forward, I think remains to be seen. So I'll finish up with just where we're at now. We have an RFQ that's ready to be issued, pending the finalized state budget everyone's talking about. That the budget request that we have in is tied to CCA funding, so that, we want the CCA funds to fund this project. And just a few lessons learned to date. For us, hiring experienced owners advisors has been great. I touched on that. We're accustomed to building buildings. Doing these big infrastructure projects is a little outside of our wheelhouse as an office on campus, and having a third party help with that has been great. Creating positive relationships with community stakeholders. A big part of that is the thermal energy network, but also the utility companies and the city as well. And in the end, be flexible. There's been plenty of unforeseen things we've adjusted to so far, and we know there's going to be a lot coming. That's a big part of why we have our preferred system divide, why we want to go from a central plant to splitting campus up into 4 nodes, is that flexibility, just being able to kind of adjust the project as the funding becomes available. So that's where we're at. I think we're ready for questions.
Well, thank you, Julian. Thank you to all 3 of our presenters today. I think I've seen everyone's furiously writing down all their questions, so maybe we'll invite our presenters up. We have, all of 45 minutes left in our 2-hour session here. So we'll have these guys come up on stage and maybe dive into a few questions. I think I'll hand off microphone.
And if you have a question, I'll hand you a mic.
And maybe just to get us started, I'll ask a question to Scott. So Scott, you have 1,000 buildings. You have 8 district energy systems. How, besides some crazy ass spreadsheet, how are you managing all of these projects across the state?
It is a crazy spreadsheet, and I think I've spent 6 or 7 months building it. And am currently doing some updates. But for the most part, my job is just figuring out what it all looks like and who needs to be doing what. And we've got so many special cases across the system. Then they get to figure out how they're going to manage the project once we've defined what direction that project needs to go. But yes, there's a little bit of a data gap right now, and we're working to clean that up.
Great. All right, in the back.
Hi, this is Pedro Liceo with HDR. So I saw a lot of thermal storage as part of the plan. Are you looking at doing that in a centralized location using phase change materials, or are you looking at a building system only?
Present plan is central location using water, but we are exploring phase change material if we were to move to a steam heat pump.
See Todd here.
All right, I'm Todd Lee. I'm with McKinstry. I'm going to ask a question where people are going to look at me funny, mostly the general contractors. My question is, in your opinion, for this work and these conversion projects, who is best to lead that from a prime design build standpoint, the general contractor or a prime mechanical electrical?
Bit of a leading question, yeah. Depends on the project, right?
I do have an answer, and then we'll get a serious answer. The most effective, least costly, quickest person.
What he said. We're going to break the project up. So I think in terms of work inside the plant versus the distribution piping versus the energy transfer stations in the building. And so you probably want to answer for each one of those, but I think I don't see there being one person responsible for the 47 projects over 14 years. But we do want to be smart about how we connect the projects. So we don't want to have like incompatible chemical requirements or pH requirements between the energy transfer stations and the piping and the plant. But we will have a need for an owner's engineer, similar to what Julian has already done for the overall project. But to basically make those connecting pieces, but then each of the projects will be put out separately, and we will, although we have a preference towards progressive design build, we will evaluate the best delivery method for each project.
From my perspective, I don't know if it really matters. I think as long as one of them, in a perfect world, everyone's resume would be all these college campus decarbonization projects they've done, but we're not there yet. What we're I think most interested in is someone we know can do the legwork necessary in terms of scheduling and coordinating the work in an occupied campus. Whether that is from the mechanical side or the civil side, less a concern as long as someone owns it and can demonstrate it. You know, a lot of it, the civil side's really pipes in the ground. There's nothing too groundbreaking about it. It's really the setting that makes us nervous. And as long as, yeah, someone can bring that project management expertise, I think, you know, it can come from either side.
Well, you got existing campuses and facilities that are, you know, running 24/7 and, you know, being able to run that site security and safety
Yeah.
and all of that, you know, I think kind of goes to the team having to be able to understand that that's what they're getting into when they go after these projects. I'll give Todd a quick shout out. So Todd Lee with McKinstry, he presented at the District Energy Conference in Boston, and he did a good job of doing a little presentation on if you're not going to get all your funding from the CCA in Washington State, what are the alternative methods? And so talking a little bit about the state law on P3, energy as a service, ESPC, ESCO stuff. And I'm sure Todd would happily share that presentation with you. Yeah, there's some pros and cons to all of them. And I think we'd all love to get enough CCA funds versus, you know, the 2X plus that sometimes those P3s bring. But any other questions? I think there's a couple here.
Thank you. Yeah, Dave Carlscott with Brailsford Dunleavy. I'm Seattle-based, but work nationally. But and worked on a lot of decarbonization projects around the country. The biggest question I always see people run into is getting approval to actually make something a real project. You know, like we're talking as if, you know, you guys kind of know what you need to do, but you need to convince your bosses to do this. And they're like, David, what do you want to do? Like, you're going to dig up our campus and what am I going to get out of this? How is that process going? And I'm sure it's different for all three of you, given the types of institutions you have, but can you speak about making real projects as opposed to Pinocchio projects?
From my standpoint, it's a real project when you have the money. And that's kind of what we're all waiting on. You know, it's kind of vetted once we're requesting the money, our bosses have signed off on saying, yeah, this is something we want to make the request for. But you know, you can plan all day until you really know your budget. It's not a real project, but you know, fingers crossed. There's something else I was gonna say there. I'll bring it up.
Well, as the mic passes down, I think it's interesting too. You know, you can ask for all the money up front, but you know, I think the state's kind of looking at it incrementally. So, okay, if there's feasibility studies, there's design, and there's kind of construction, and so you know, and I think we're kind of fighting with that right now. Like, okay, do we get all this money up front, or do we get it? Do we have to keep going back every biennium to ask for it for each of these campuses? So we're, you know, kind of figuring that out as the CCA is only one biennium old, and here we are in the second, you know, kind of governor's budget request cycle. So I think once the dust settles, we'll, with this 5 days and counting until we get that budget locked in, we'll see what it kind of looks like. But I still think that, you know, again, back in napkin math, $5 billion to get all these campuses decarbonized. They're not all going to happen at the same time. I'm pretty sure David Woodson's plan is not going to be knocked out in 5 years. I think Julian's can be knocked out in 5 years. You know, I think what Central Washington's doing they're already breaking ground. So there's different scales to all these projects happening, and they kind of can happen at the same time, looking at it holistically.
Yeah, I'd say that question has come up in the meetings I've been able to sit in on the planning development right now. And most of ours should be a different level of scale, a little lesser impact because we're going to be working on individual buildings. But even there, it's not, you don't just drop a heat pump in place of a natural gas boiler and everything's fine, right? So we don't know yet. And we do expect some navigation through the future of that, yeah.
I think there's a lot of hi, good to see you, David. There's a lot of pre-sale that has to be done. I mean, there's just no way you're going to get this magnitude of cost in a normal situation, which we are not in, right? Like we're in a situation where the state is challenged Was that an understatement or what? And at the same time, there's massive uncertainty at the federal level with respect to impact on grants, right? UW is one of the largest public institutions that receive federal grants. And so you got those two things in the background. But even if you just remove those, there's no way you're coming along and making an ask for 1.6 billion over 14 years and just surprising somebody by that, right? There's a whole bunch of pre-sale of like, why do we need to do this? And it's everything from money you would need to spend anyway to how reliable is your electrical grid right now? Like how many voltage sags is okay, right? You know, UW and we had that, everyone's in Seattle, we had the power outage in January. Everybody kind of remember that? How many people here, anybody here out power more than one day? Yeah, okay, all right. How was that, right? UW was lucky. We were not impacted other than we had received 50 voltage sags in a 2-hour period, right? Now, the good news is most of the equipment trips off the first voltage sag, so the other 49 didn't really matter. But that's an issue. So, it's an issue for us. Even before that event, we had something like 150 voltage sags over a 1.5-year period. Every time those happen, a whole bunch of our control systems trip off and require someone to manually reset them. And there's research equipment that trips off that requires someone to manually reset. Not that that's a major cost, but when you're a research institution relying on reliable electricity, that's a big deal. Anyway, so the point being, whether it's no cooling in the summer, and oh, by the way, that's going to get worse, and you don't have reliable electricity today, and you got to spend $100 million plus, or hundreds of millions of dollars on your aged steam system anyway, right? You got to tell that story, and enough senior folks, not just within the university, but within the state, in commerce and ecology, and all these other agencies need to be aware of it. And we've been doing that over the last 3 years, taking every opportunity. So when someone like Josh says, you want to go up on the stage, you're like, yeah, absolutely. And we'll tell the story of what's going on here so that, that everybody knows. So now, does that actually get us money to the magnitude that we need? Well, okay. I mean, so far we've received about $64 million in CCA proceeds since the start of this. Not the magnitude that we need, but not bad. And we've done some really good sort of enabling projects of increasing cooling capacity at the central plant in an effort to mitigate our electrical consumption, to put us in a better position for when the heat pumps come, to some efficiency plays inside buildings. So you got to tell your story, take the wins when you get them, and yeah, we're trying to do this on a much bigger scale. And as I said, nobody went into this with eyes open thinking this was just going to be an easy thing, and we drop the plan and magically someone gives me 1.6 billion and we execute it.
I think there's a momentum piece too. So there's, planning happens, the projects get rolling forward, and, then there's this, when you're in the weeds, it feels like all of a sudden there's this big calm, but there's this momentum piece that I think are trying to keep rolling on some of these projects. I think, the earlier slide that we had showed 136 million for the higher ed campus decarb. I think the ask from all the universities is 875 million for this biennium. So are they going to get all that? Probably not, but that's what we're in the middle of finding out where we're at. And it'll be, an every 2-year biennium process. So there's a lot of momentum that we need to keep rolling with this. Questions? Yeah.
Hi, Zach Stevens from WSP. I was going to ask a question about money, but David took us towards the grid, so I'll go there instead. I'm curious how that process has been working with Seattle City Light. You talked about new substations, possibly plural. Curious how that planning is going and whether you talked about battery energy storage systems on site, dealing with some of those resiliency challenges, kind of different revenue streams there. Is that something you've gotten into on the electrical side?
So conversations with Seattle State Light have been excellent. We've been meeting, the frequencies had varied, but I think we've met with them, 20 times over the last 1.5 years. So the plan is one new substation. that would be dedicated to UW, but basically frees up what's called the university substation. That's actually Seattle City Light substation that feeds more than the university. But would free up capacity for their network in that area. So so that's the focus. So not one or not two, but just one. Batteries was discussed lightly, but not really, because of the magnitude of the length of time of which we would need to provision that. It's more of using cooling storage as a means of mitigating the electrical demand in the summertime on the cooling system, basically acting as another chiller.
Questions back?
I keep asking folks, have you talked to your utility? And because I know that the 4 years are running into that local capacity issue. And I haven't heard anyone yet who's run into a capacity, but I am expecting it'll happen somewhere. Just, it's not an issue on our radar yet, put it that way.
Our conversations with PSE we're a PSE customer, still pretty preliminary at this point. There's been a handful of meetings, not the level David has had with City Light. It is a hard conversation just because it's, chicken or the egg. What are you guys gonna do? Well, we'll know what we do when we get the funding, and making the timelines align is a challenge, but.
Sorry, I think one of the other things that was kind of really important in this was so we made a conscious effort to have a great working relationship with Seattle City Light. And frankly, that came out of at UBC and the relationship with BC Hydro. The relationship with the conservation folks at BC Hydro was always fantastic. The relationship with the infrastructure people was non-existent. And we had to build that. And it took a lot of meetings to get trust, where there's challenges on the infrastructure side of the system that they're not necessarily wanting to share with you. And it took time and years before all of a sudden that started to open up. And I think there's an element of how you react to when they tell you something that might scare the crap out of you, might impact the way in which they share that in the future. And so we've been going out of our way, and honestly, Seattle City Light has been fantastic in this conversation of really trying to build stronger trust of not just what UW's challenge is in that part of the city, but what is Seattle City Light's challenge in that part of the city, and what can we do jointly that basically is the best solution for both of us. And that's where it's landed on this sort of new dedicated substation.
Hi, Brendan Carlson with Altura. Just wanted to ask how you guys are thinking about using operating data to help inform your decisions as your buildings, your district energy systems, your distribution evolves over time, both in terms of evaluating, what's happening right now and what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think a fundamental starting point is how good is the data you have at the beginning, and it's a work in progress. I mean, I wish we had better data than we did 3 years ago, and a lot of the data that we had went into what AEI put into their report. But our data is going to constantly improve, and whether that's metering data or ensuring that those meters are actually calibrated and telling you something that's beneficial, or energy data within the buildings, or the feedback from the buildings of how they're interfacing with the district system. I mean, you guys have done a ton of work at our Westcott plant on optimizing the chiller. It's a game changer in terms of the whole machine learning AI space. It's almost like the transformation of how we used to go to the bank and you go in person, and now you do it all on your phone. It's like that same transformation is happening with buildings and energy data, but we don't quite have all the infrastructure in place to be able to capture that data. I see it as being fundamental, but it's just another thing you're kind of doing on the side to try to catch up. It's not like you can just do that all at once and then start everything.
Yeah, my first thought was what data? And we have a few colleges that are, I would say, very on top of their controls data. We have others who are doing the bare minimum and they call somebody when there's some kind of issue. And then we have buildings that still have pneumatic controls on one floor and digital on another, right? So it's a bit of a mess. I think, to David's point, that infrastructure, the missing element that I'm starting to talk with folks about is a staff person who's trained and dedicated to maintaining that information and making it useful. And that's going to be a bit of a challenge for us for a while. So that's more or less where we are. Like I said, there's a couple campuses that are really doing some amazing work, and I'm learning from them. And there are others who, as long as they can write it down someplace, they're good.
We might have it kind of easier than these two in that regards, just because we have a bit more manageable of a, we're one campus, pretty much everything is right there. And we have a great control shop. Jeff Aslin is our utility manager, and he could probably speak to it better than me, but generally we have a fair amount of good data available to us right now. There's always more we'd like. Specifically, I can think of geographic data in regards to how the geofields will potentially perform, and don't have a great sense of the ultimate water temperatures we can be running our buildings at. That's something we've kind of talked about, but generally, I think we're in a reasonable spot as far as the data we have right now.
The only other part I'd add too is just like keeping track of like who's doing what around the country. There's some really cool stuff like Princeton has their first phase of their geoexchange place and their.
Can you just hand, pardon me, can you hand, for our folks online can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I was just going to say, like, just tracking what people are doing around the country, Princeton in particular, with what they've done on their first phase of their geoexchange system. It's really impressive, and monitoring its performance because they're trying to, turn it into that sort of living lab piece of where students can also learn from the system. And then, Stanford's doing some really cool stuff. Florida's doing some really cool stuff. Yale's doing some really, there's a whole, not everybody, but there's like a handful of folks that are doing some really fantastic things on the AI machine learning front.
Questions in the back? I know I've got a couple. No, someone besides Todd.
Okay, they're gonna let me
I'm
ask
kidding.
one more.
I'm kidding.
This is a good question, I think.
We'll see.
You talk a lot about challenges at state level from funding, federal level from funding, all of the chaos, I call it. One of the things I continue to hear in a lot of presentations around universities is an enrollment cliff and impending enrollment cliff. And what does that look like? What does a future of learning look like? And so, throw another element in. I'm just curious about, I hear about enrollment cliff. I hear people talking about it, but what really is that? And is that even in a conversation when you're thinking about already really complex issues?
Well, it's outside my lane, but from what I know, that is not an issue at UW.
My understanding is too many old people and not enough young people, but I'm not. Yeah, enrollment is an uncertainty, and the reality is that public funding in Washington shifted more of the budgetary load onto tuition in 09, 10, sometime in there. And so it increases our vulnerability to that uncertainty. I will say that I think David's doing an excellent job of this. And I'm trying to work on it. But one of the realities here is we're talking about a capital investment that can reduce our operating costs if we do it well. But the very first glimpse for most people is, oh, that's a big chunk of money, right? Without the additional context. And I have another great idea. I'll just share this right now. Since you mentioned it, we don't know, are we going to have 20,000 students next year? Is it going to be 10,000? We need origami buildings that we can fold up if we're not using them. All right, anyway.
I can't speak too much to enrollment. I know it's obviously been a big focus for the last few years. I want to say we're doing a little better than some of the other regional schools. Definitely saw the same dips as everyone. But something we've talked about a bit is really the potential for these projects, not only to reduce operating costs, but be a draw for students, depending on your university. But we feel like Western in particular, we have a college of the environment. It's the hippie school. And we want hippies to come. You know, we want to make it a school that they're excited about. We see this as a great way to do that. So.
Just to jump on that, right? Like, let's not lose sight of the fact of what the campuses are actually supposed to be. And then you got this massive infrastructure project that, you know, I tried to make the pitch that it's more than just the UW campus. It's every city, it's every hospital, it's every airport, right? And there's this project touches on, you know, it's probably the greatest civil engineering project got done at UW since the tunnels were built. You know, mechanical engineering, business school, MBA folks. Oh, right, don't forget the environmental studies folks. Like there's so many elements where this can tie into the curriculum of the campus. You know, that's kind of like this other piece of like, you know, how good could this be, right? Like, you know, don't just solve one problem, but make this problem way bigger and tie it in with who we are and who we want to be.
And I can maybe speak a little to the Central Washington University experience, just hanging out there last week in Ellensburg. So they had their geothermal symposium. I mean, it was a really cool event, and they had professors and classes and students there. They had geologists there. They're, you know, in the Q&A session, they're asking, what kind of rocks are you finding in those holes you're digging? And so, I mean, it was really fun to see the curriculum that they're focusing on. You know, 5, 6 different programs are going to be using what they're learning from these projects in their curriculum, in their courses. And that's just really fun to see that opportunity. I mean, and they're looking at going 10,000 feet deep with one of their holes because they have a big open loop system and they can. So, you know, they're learning and sharing it as they go. And I think that's the opportunity for all of these campuses. All right, we got smart people in the room. We got a few more minutes. We could do another question or two. The farthest guy.
Morning, Steve Brooks with UMC. Really efficient buildings have low demand and plants can be smaller for that. So how do you balance the investment in building efficiency and what sequence do you use to get that done well so that you're not overbuilding your plant for the inefficient buildings you have now?
Okay, short answer, usually wrong. Okay, the reality is you have to do both. I got 200 buildings on my campus. If I did 4 major retrofits of buildings a year, then it'll take me 50 years before I'm ready to size my plant. That's too long. So I need to put in my new plant and I'm going to oversize it. But at the same time, I am going to make investments into buildings and make them more efficient. And when I go to renew my plant 40 years from now or 50 years from now, then I get to resize it to that new efficiency that the buildings have got to. And that cycle basically then repeats itself every 40, 50 years.
We have a magic 8 ball. It'll be really, sorry. Anyway, it'll be really interesting to see what the final plans look like. I think that one of the things we have to keep in mind is that the campus really isn't a static entity. It is changing regularly. Programming moves from building to building. The programs that we're teaching change maybe every 5, 10 years, but there is a constant level, small level of change. So one of the dangers that I saw while I was in Evergreen about efficiency is it does tighten us down, can tighten us down so much that we don't have the flexibility to adapt to future change. And I think, to Dave's point about timing and everything else, and even knowing what's going to be the best solution that will fit with that system we're going to put in 10 years is a big enough challenge. We've got to maintain some level of flexibility and not get stuck in a rut that isn't the direction we really needed in 15 or 20 years. And I think that's the other thing, that we're life-term owners of the buildings. We are just temporary stewards, but the college is probably going to own that building until it's demolished. And so there's a very long-term timeline that we have to keep in mind.
I would just agree with what's been said, and for Western in particular, in a perfect world, the timing's kind of nice. We've been building new buildings, but we're at a point in our master plan where there's really not a lot of new buildings on the horizon. And, we talk about you always want spare capacity for growth and whatnot, but, we also, everything, at least I've said, has been focused on the distribution side. We haven't talked about all these old buildings we have, but, you retrofit a building from 1800, like, you're going to see huge gains in efficiency in these existing buildings as those get renovated over time. So, hopefully you build in some capacity as you do retrofits over time. You're kind of getting capacity back from getting rid of these older buildings. And also we talked about being flexible and having, nodes, have them interconnected, give yourself the chance to share those loads where you do have too much or not enough capacity.
So UBC, we overbuilt the plant, but there was so much growth over the time of the project, and all those buildings were supposed to have, they were supposed to be zero energy buildings, and they weren't, because they were all research lab facilities. And so we found ourselves at the completion of the project, after, making the big pitch and getting the significant dollars to do the work, we found ourselves being one boiler short and going to make a budget ask to our Board of Regents to say, hey, it's us again. We need another $27 million to put another boiler in the plant. Yeah, that doesn't go over very well, right? So there is an element of saying, yeah, you know what, you're a little better to make it a little bigger and have that extra space and not go back to the well a second time.
Okay, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're almost at time. Do we have a burning question out there? One burning question? All right, burning question. And then I think
Hi, hello. My name is Alvina. I am a PhD student at UW. My research is in decarbonization of existing buildings and new builds. So I do have a question. So we're kind of playing around the decision to retrofit or to knock down and rebuild. And so for the three of you, I'm wondering what that decision-making process looks like for you, especially at UW, where we don't have to add to the existing building stock. So I'm thinking, how does that look like for you? It could be in terms of buildings or even in mechanical, that's totally fine. And my last question is, you're talking about budgeting, so state budgeting, federal budgeting, but there's been conversations around the budget cut for the federal funding. So does that kind of, will they affect your budget for your decarbonization efforts or not?
Two questions, part one, part two.
I think I got the first question kind of in terms of what do you retrofit, what do you replace? And I think, in terms of the steam plant system, from our perspective, a lot of it, the steam pipe you can't reuse. It's the wrong size. Maybe you could use some of it, but it's not something we've really investigated. The plant's right in the middle of the campus. The plant's not, just not really appropriate to be a new plant housing all this air-cooled equipment. So I want to say it's kind of just a decision of what works in your existing space. Also the steam plant is kind of in the middle of campus for us, and the tunnels are super congested there where the closer you get to the plant. So just logistically and in terms of, working with an occupied campus, it feels a lot easier to start a kind of new, smaller plant away from the central plant and kind of build your way towards it, just to maximize the available space you have. And in terms of federal funding affecting our projects, I don't think I can speak much to that. The budget is thankfully outside of my wheelhouse. But I hope it doesn't hurt us too much.
Yeah, I think that question of the old building, whether it's better to retrofit the old building or replace it with something new, right? Yeah. That isn't happening at my level. That's happening at the college level. I know one of the colleges that are currently working on a decarb plan is just starting a full campus refreshment. And this is going to take them years, but they've got a lot of very old buildings and infrastructure that needs to be updated and replaced. So they've already got that plan started, and we're hoping that the decarbonization will fit well within that scope. It is a valid question. I would say this is public sector. We tend to use things until they're no longer useful. And so it's a decision that has to be made all the time. But that planning mostly happens at the college level. And budget for us, we predominantly rely upon state budget. I think there's a little bit of federal on the capital side, not the operations, a little bit of federal funding that we can tap every now and then, but we're looking at state.
Okay, so on the buildings, whether you renew them or replace them, it's a great question. I don't think energy is the driver. I think energy is one of the inputs. Whether the building is seismically set is another input. I think the main driver is, does the building fit its purpose from whatever academic mission is taking place inside the building, right? Like has the group that is inside, like, does it meet what they need in order to do what they want to do with that particular academic program, or has that program completely changed? And the second question is, sorry, before I get the second one, I think there's another pivot too of, I don't think it's as quite as like replace it versus renew it. One of the programs they did at UBC was they renewed them, but basically the only thing that was retained was the concrete structure, and they completely modernized the building, literally, having a bulldozer go down the floor on one of the facilities. So if virtually a new building, but they were stuck to the whatever that frame of that building was on that particular lot. And so, that's another sort of land use. Are you maximizing the use of the land by retaining that building that's there? And obviously the whole scope 3 embodied carbon piece of building a brand new building versus just, taking down the one that's there. So a lot of factors that would go into that, and probably should have started with outside of my lane as the energy guy. But you're very, like, I'm very much in the room where those conversations are happening around, what is the energy input into that conversation, but we're not the driver. On the federal one, I think it's just so much uncertainty, and we don't know. And it's sort of like, okay, feels like we're closer to getting the uncertainty cleared at the state level, at least in the relative short term. And then still kind of waiting to see what happens federally on the grant impact. And it's everything from the federal grants that the university gets to the indirect cost of research that the university has to even the effect on Medicaid and what that effect would be on UW Hospital. So it's not small, and everyone's hoping for something that's normal. Is normal something to hope for? Okay, that's what I'm hoping for.
And so on that note, we're basically at time. Thank you all again for coming and joining us today. I think I couldn't be, prouder of the work that all of us are doing to try to move these projects forward. Yeah, there's challenges. Yeah, there's momentum, times where we gotta, get the wind back in the sails, but I think we're all working towards, positive results on these projects. So thank you for all coming in today. A round of applause again for our guest speakers. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. And stay tuned. I think we're going to do something again in the fall after the dust settles on the budget, and we'll kind of, again, it's about momentum, keeping the conversation going, and we hope to see you all then. And if some of us will stick around, and we are at noon, so if you have to run, by all means, those pastries back there, they came out of Abby's oven this morning, so those are fresh pastries. Grab one on your way out. If you want to hang out a little bit, feel free to do so. But again, thank you all for joining us today.